I'm going to make a really sweeping statement right now and
Go
say,
ahead.
don't start a D2C business right now. Um,
Oh.
unless you have $1 million in the bank to basically throw into marketing. 10 years ago, 15 years ago, if you had the money, you could kind of do it. But in the last, iOS 14 updates, all that stuff, it's made the cost of acquisition so much higher. It's made the competition so much more expensive. So if you're doing Google ads, Google shopping, Google search, the cost of acquisition is so much higher than it was. If you only have a little bit of money to start a business right now, it's you have to create so much content to actually kind of break through all the noise. You have to put so much into marketing that I'm looking at businesses and with Otherwild assessing these businesses, people are throwing 50% of their revenue budget into marketing, because that's what you have to do if you're going to start a D2C brand, unless you already are at the 5-10 million stage and you have $1 million marketing budget.
Today we have the honor of speaking with Tony McWilliam, a seasoned brand founder, entrepreneur, designer, agency owner, publisher, business leader, sustainability advocate, and much more. If you're interested in brand building and want insights to growing a successful company, then you're in for a treat today. Not only will we talk about Tony's story and listen to how he succeeded in the business, but he also talks about how he had to leave the company he founded and was left with nothing. It's a must listen if you want to avoid the same situation. There's so much valuable information in this interview, so let's dive into the conversation.
Hi, Tony. We're really excited to have you on today because of your story. And I think a lot of our listeners are going to learn a lot from you today. First of all, let's introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about what you do today.
Thanks, Anna. Thanks, Glass. So my name's Tony. Obviously, I am Australian but live in Switzerland, and I do a couple of things. So my main job at the moment, or task at the moment, is running Candy Direx's outerwear and hard goods program. So everything from line planning, budgeting, design through to development, supply chain management, and then actually just through the networks I've built over the years, introducing the project to sales and distribution and media kind of globally. But I started, if we go straight back to kind of where I started, I'm from Melbourne originally in Australia, and I have a product design degree. So that's where I kind of learned the whole process of design thinking, and really focused on problem solving. And over the years, I couldn't actually find any work in product design. When I finished my degree, I majored in automotive styling and furniture design, which is a world away from where I am now. But the first job I found out of university was actually as a lift attendant. So the people at the bottom of the lift who help you get on and check your tickets and all that stuff. And believe it or not, there are ski resorts in Australia. And that took me I did a couple of years doing that in Australia and North America as well, so Canada. And then came back to Melbourne, and it was the end of the 90s, and I was like, I need to get out of here. I need to do something different. So I just bought a ticket to Geneva. And I just had a ski bag. I had this book called Where to Ski and Snowboard, because this is, pre-internet. And I just ended up at this French ski resort called Les Deux Alpes, which probably a lot of people might know. And by that stage, I was doing a lot of kind of freelance design work as more web design work. So the web had just kind of taken off, and I'd kind of got into that quite early. I was quite tech savvy at that time, and ended up doing winters in the French Alps and then summers in London. As you do, being Australian, you end up in London at some point. And so I was having a really good education from the actual kind of consulting and design work I was doing in London over the summers. And in the winters, I was skiing a lot, as you do, doing bits and pieces of design work for hotels and resorts and things like that. And I randomly got this email from a Chinese factory, as you do. You just end up getting emails from Chinese factories at some point in your life. And it was a Chinese ski company looking for European distribution. And till that point, I hadn't really thought about it. I had a lot of friends who were competing on what was the IFSA. So this is pre the Free Ride World Tour. There was something called the IFSA. And I did a few competitions, but I wasn't as good, and my friends were really good. And I was doing things like painting their skis and snowboards, just for some kind of creative outlet. And at the time, there really was a lack of decent big mountain powder skis. It was really hard to find anything. You could find like Heliops, Rossi Cuts, these atomic heli skis, which like you could find in secondhand stores right at the back that no one wanted and things like that. It was really hard to find anything that actually kind of fitted the type of skiing me and my friends were trying to do. So that this email that I got from a Chinese company went, oh, hang on, why don't I just try and make some skis? Like how hard can it be? And I found this little factory which was just south of Evian, near where I was kind of working at the time. And they were like, yeah, we'll make you some skis. Kind of, what do you want? And I'm like, I have no idea. So this started this process of kind of going, oh, okay, well, I'm a problem solver. I'm a product designer. What do I need to know? And it kind of went down this path of making this first year of skis, and we made 44 pairs of skis. And by that stage, I'd moved to Verbier. So this is kind of 2002, 2003. I'd moved to Verbier because I had a lot of friends here, and there was more chance of getting design work in Verbier than Leaders Out, frankly. And Christmas Eve 2003, it must have been, I went over to Evian, put these 44 pairs of skis in the back of a car, and the guy at the factory was like, so here's your customs declaration and here's your certificate. I'm like, what are you talking about? What's customs? I have to declare? And they're like, yeah, you need to stop at the border and declare everything. I'm like, oh, okay. And it was Christmas Eve. It was packed. They weren't stopping anybody. They just kind of let everyone drive through. So that was my first lucky break. And
that was actually your entry into starting everything. All right.
Yeah.
Okay.
That was my entry into starting everything. So, and there was kind of one person who helped me get it out to the world. It was this guy called Phil Martin, who was a journalist in the UK, and he was competing on the IFSA as well with myself, but we were kind of the bottom rung of competitors. So we hung out a lot, and I sent an email to him and he introduced it to a lot of his friends. And through him, basically, we sold that entire kind of first batch of skis. Oh, and great. I was kind of off and going. And I was like, oh, this is great. This is cool.
Easy.
And easy. This is going to be fine. I'll set up a website. It'll be great. And at the time, so this is pre-Facebook, pre-social media. But what there was a network in the States called New Schoolers. And I don't know if you're familiar with New Schoolers. So it was like a message board. It still is actually kind of just a message board of people who are passionate about skiing, kids like teenagers, 20s to 30 kind of thing, who just talk about skiing and shit talk each other. And that's where I kind of started posting and I started getting involved. And this is the same time when Armada was starting, Forefront, Movement had been around for a couple of years. So all these little brands, Amplit as well over in Germany, Pete Bauer, who turned out to be an amazing kind of friend and reference point. And that's kind of how it all started. And I was like, yeah, D2C, I'll get all these people buying my products. And we got a few people kind of buying, but I had no money. I had no idea what I was doing. I was a designer. I was not a business person. And so it kind of stumbled along for kind of 3 years or so. And then in 2006, so by this time I'm living in Verbier, but going back to Australia a fair bit. And I was senior designer at an agency in Melbourne, working with guys like Ford and Foster's and Coke, writing ad copy, designing ads, doing brand management, wayfinding for stadiums, kind of. So that was giving me a really good reference in branding, graphic design, while at the same time I'm kind of growing things in Switzerland. And I just met a guy in the bar, as you do, and he was American living in London, and he was like, oh, this sounds really interesting. Yeah, do you want some business advice, and some cash potentially? And I was like, oh yeah, this sounds good.
I'm here.
Yeah.
This is where you send the check.
Yeah, exactly. So we started working together. He lived in London, and I lived out here, and we kind of, I was getting by doing design work. A friend of mine had an idea to start up a magazine. So there's a magazine in Verbier called Verbier Life, which has been running now for kind of 15, 16 years. Mm-hmm. And it is and again, this is pre-Facebook. So it was this magazine, there was no way to know what was going on in the bars or anything around town. So we started this magazine, and it's just been a really great resource. And that was basically paying my rent. I do design work for bars, and that would pay my drinks tab. And trying to use every spare moment and spare time I had to build Faction. And then in kind of about 2009, 10, we kind of realized that skis, you don't make a lot of margin on skis. And then so my business partner was like, well, why don't we do outerwear? And you're like, okay. And I was lucky enough that one of my friends here was a product developer in the early days for Scott and Bonfire. So he had a lot of networks. He had an agency that he partnered with in Seattle who did a lot of the development work and the relationship with the factories. So he was like, yeah, I can help you. You do design, you show me what you want, and I will kind of fill in the gaps around you. And that was amazing because I'm kind of the person who I don't have an opinion on anything unless you kind of go, well, hang on, no, look at that microphone. Like, can you make that better? What would you do with it? How would you design it? And then I kind of go, oh yeah, well, actually, what I would do is this, that. So even though obviously I'd been skiing for a lot and using technical outerwear every day and using performance materials and fabrics, etc., every day, I never really thought about it that much before. And when we kind of sat down and said, okay, well, let's do outerwear, I was like, oh, okay. And then once I started approaching it, it was fairly easy for me to generate an opinion and start creating designs and ideas. So I came up with a line of designs, mostly just pen and paper, literally, drawings, looking at things that like, how can we create a signature design style? Can we create elements that can combine with what we need functionally in terms of pockets, zips, etc., and create something that's kind of unique? Because at the time, there was a big lack, again, of outerwear for skiers, which maybe looked like skiers who actually appreciated snowboarding style more. In Europe, where I am especially, there's a lot of mountaineering, a lot of high alpine equipment. So it's a lot of really tight fits. Everything's designed around harnesses and stuff like that. And for us, we were like, I kind of want like something like Burton, or Analog. Oh my God, Analog was a huge influence, and everything acronym related, but we'll get to that.
So how did you approach the design, and how did you approach the first collection that you launched with your background, of course, in product design, and you having that design thinking mentality, and also zero background in the apparel industry, more into design and product development materials and all that. Of course, you had a colleague that could help you out, or like your friend that could help you out. But how did you approach that? What was your go-to? How did you know basically what to do? How many cells to put into the first collection? How did you figure it out?
By that stage, luckily, we'd kind of built a sales network that was in the US, quite a lot of distribution in Europe, and also Japan, for example, as well. So what we were able to do at that point is not employ technically, but talk to them and say, okay, what's in your market? What is happening in your market? Where are the right price points? What's working, what isn't working? Where are the opportunities? And from that point of perspective, and this is how I tend to work now, I work backwards from the market, even though, I'm a creative.
I love this. I'm going to interrupt you, but I so love this. And again, sorry for the interruption, but so many of founders, they don't do this. They don't think about that they need to reverse engineer. And we actually said this in a reel the other day. And it's so important. You did this intuitively, and it's fantastic. Nobody actually told you, basically, I guess, right? You just did it because it made sense and because it's a logical thing to do. And also you would have the information, you would have the facts, and then you'd know that your collection would be way more successful because you know that you would sell because this is the market demand.
Yeah, and you're trying to balance both market demand, but also personal expression and creativity, and it's really hard to juggle those things. But also what we kind of already knew was that we had a brand, and the brand that we built through Faction was based on really high quality stuff. It fitted into a certain price point, and so what we wanted to do was do that with the apparel as well. So as we designed it, we actually designed quite a large cross section of price point pieces. We had 2-layer insulated jackets, and then we went all the way up to 3-layer, shells. And the first year, and actually what we thought from the reference points we had, we'd sell a lot of the cheaper price point things, because the sales team always are like, give me something cheap. I can sell if it's cheap. And you're like, that doesn't really fit the brand. We need to create a flagship. We need to create an aspirational positioning. And actually what we found better, because in the lower price point things, there was already too much competition. They'd go and buy it from Quicksilver. They'd buy it from Billabong, but what we're able to do is actually create this kind of 3-layer flagship pieces in the first year or so, which held their value. I mean, I've still got people here who actually, I still see it and they're still wearing it. And you're like, that's incredible.
How big was the collection? The launch collection?
The launch collection was, there was 3-layer jacket and bib. Then there was, I think, 3 different combinations of 2-layer insulated. And then we actually quite had a bulky 2-layer jacket as well. Then we had mid layers and a couple of soft goods. It was small, we're talking kind of 5
So you
styles,
focus in the
outerwear
outerwear range, basically.
Straight into outerwear. Yeah, we'd always thought about doing things like soft goods, but we'd never had the chance to focus on it. We were a small team of people. Like, trying to do soft goods it's either a branding opportunity, which means people don't really value it, or you can do things which are really great with soft goods, but you need the right supply chain, you need the right fabrics, you need the right people to work with, and you need something that's kind of unique and different. And for us, soft goods was a whole nother world. Knit versus woven is it's a different language, it's a different supply chain, it's different everything.
This episode is sponsored by Designer. Designer is a leading strategy, branding, and design agency offering services from idea to product launch or end-to-end solutions for apparel brands. Designer helps you build apparel brands that push categories to the next level and enhance people's lives with minimal environmental footprint. Go and visit designer.com to learn more and book a first meeting.
Was it strategical to actually not go into all layers, into base layers, mid layers, outer? Was it strategic? Did you make a strategic decision? No, let's focus on one segment, nail this, do the best we can, position the brand in the market, let's take lead, and then the other stuff can come later. Exactly. Or how did you go about it?
Yeah, exactly. As I said, we're a small team of people. So try and think about, well, how do we sell outerwear, mid layers, base layers, soft goods, etc. is just, it's really tough. And so the idea was that we focus on the outerwear, we get that right, we make it really premium and aspirational. And then over time, we expand the collection and grow. But that didn't happen. So, go for it.
Yeah, how was it received? I mean, you came from hard goods and then you added soft goods. Did you have the same customers? Were they just, oh, fantastic, finally get it? Or do you have to find new customers for this, the apparel?
Well, this is the learning part of the process, Klaus. Because what actually happened is over the years of doing it. So we did that collection for maybe 5 or 6 years, and we grew to probably $1 million and a bit in revenue just on the apparel side of things. But it reached this point where we were like, it was confusing our messaging. People were like, well, are you a hard goods brand or are you an outerwear brand? It's like, are you a doctor and a pilot, or are you just a doctor? Like, how can you be good at both of them? And this is where it comes back to branding. And this is where it came back to me kind of realizing that actually, if we're trying to create a brand and we're trying to create a reputation for doing one thing, you really need to focus on that. Because if you try and get into other things, people are just like, well, I don't understand it. And this happens subconsciously. It's not like they sit there and talk to you and go, well, I don't get it. Why are you doing that? It's like they just don't have the affinity for other categories of products or that they do for the thing that you're known for. And so we hit a point whereas it was difficult for our marketing guys to go, well, hang on, somehow I've got to talk to people who are interested in apparel and people who are interested in hard goods. We also had Roxy. We were licensing Roxy skis by that time as well.
Oh.
So we had 3 different brands to talk about, and it was really complex. And we reached a point where we were like, shit, no one wants to walk into a store anymore and go in and buy a faction helmet, a faction goggle, a faction outerwear piece, a faction mid-layer, faction t-shirt, faction socks, faction ski boots, faction bindings, faction skis. Like, people just don't purchase like that. There are some caveats that, you know, guys like Armada did really well, Black Crows have done really well, you know, Solomon, Rossignol, etc. have good collections, but they're 50, 100-year brands. Like, it takes a lot of time and a lot of energy, and Black Crows had a really different way of growing their business than we did. And we can get to that. But so what happened kind of to 2015, 2016 is, you know, the outerwear just wasn't growing at the rate that we were hoping for. Our hard goods side was growing at 40% year on year, and our apparel was growing at like 10% year on year. And it just wasn't gelling with the retailers. The reps were confused. So we took a decision internally in kind of 2016 to stop and actually rebrand. So we took the
rebrand the entire faction brand, or just the
outerwear,
the apparel segment, the apparel. Okay.
Yeah, exactly. Because and it made everyone just kind of go, oh, I get it now. Finally, you know, I can talk about faction as a product and about a brand and what it does, and then I can talk about this other brand about separately. And it just made everything clearer, and it made everything easier, and it made all the communication, the sales process, everyone just went, yeah, that's fine. I get it. I can
just to clarify, what do you mean by rebrand? Do you mean because the
change
faction
the name
logo, the faction? Oh, okay. So you changed the name, everything.
So outerwear stopped being faction and it became something else.
Yeah.
And we took the opportunity to redesign the whole line. So we came with a completely new brand positioning.
All right.
And sustainability, that's when really sustainability was getting on everyone's agenda, you know. And I was learning a lot about fabrics. I was learning a lot more about what it was possible to do with outerwear versus skis. And trying to make us environmentally friendly ski is really difficult. You know, there are technical advancements, bioepoxies, you know, hemp. You can use hemp as a as a fiberglass replacement. You can use different top sheet materials, but really a ski is not very environmentally friendly. Whereas outerwear, you can do a lot of things. And we can get to sustainability, we can get to as a completely different topic. But so at that point, we were like, it gave us the opportunity to go, well, actually, with outerwear, what we want to do is we want to focus on sustainability. We want to incorporate different fabrics, whether they're recycled or bio-based. We want to think about life cycle. We want to think about our business and say, okay, well, this is where we are. Where can we get to in 2 years' time, 3 years' time, 5 years' time? And that actually gave us the opportunity to think about, well, if we can do this for apparel, how can we then think about it with skis and the hard goods side of things? So coming to apparel with a completely fresh point of view, and actually not having that legacy of where faction had been for kind of 10 years at that point, let us actually think of everything from scratch and go, right, this is where we want to be and what we want to do as a business. And that kind of led to so faction now is a B Corp, which they just achieved kind of a couple of weeks ago. And that kind of led to that process.
But how did this affect your business when you did all the rebranding? Was it like one step backwards and then 2 steps forward? How did it affect your business in the short and long term?
Well, we launched, so I'd spent a year. So I basically scrambled. I'd done about 18 months of development in a year, redesigned the entire line, come up with an entire new brand, position, offering, graphic styles, everything. And we took it to the sales meeting in October, and literally in the middle of the sales meeting, someone went, oh, you know that there's a brand with the same name in the States just down the road from our US office who's just started doing all this stuff too. Like they'd only used to make boots. We were aware of them. I can't actually say the name. We were aware of them, but we were like, they just make boots, and they make boots in, I don't know, Indonesia or something, and then ship them in. I don't know. And it was tiny. And then actually in the year from we'd kind of gone, okay, there is no trademark overlap with them. We'd researched that. It was fine. In that year, they'd done exactly what we had decided to do. And we're launching the same thing at the same time. We were like, oh.
Okay, this is interesting. So tell us more. This is crazy.
So we hit a complete trademark block. We couldn't continue. We'd spent, a year of my time, external development team. We'd, rediscussed everything with the factories. We'd probably put about 100,000 into samples. So salesman samples, we'd ordered all the salesman samples, and we had to stop the whole thing. And
scrap everything. Basically, you could not use anything.
Oh, sorry. The designs themselves then got rebranded into a new name. Sorry,
but the actual product.
But all the branding, so all the zip pulls which we'd crafted and all the linings which had printed the name printed on in the middle of this beautiful print, we'd gone, yeah, let's put the name in the middle. So yeah, we had to scrap everything. We had to redo everything. And at the same time, and it comes into the topic of my LinkedIn post the other day, I was having disagreements with my partner and the board on a certain kind of couple of points. And at that point in time, I just had my second daughter and I was like, this is just all too much. And things kind of kicked off internally, which is where I left.
Because this is actually why you're here today, because of that LinkedIn post. I mean, we didn't know each other until I saw that LinkedIn post that totally resonated with me, and that really felt like a punch in the gut. And that's when I kind of knew you have to come on and tell your story. So please share what you shared in that LinkedIn post.
Yeah, so basically, I don't want to say anything that's too contentious, but you know, you reach a point in a business, and you reach a point with probably a business partner or someone you've worked with for a long time, that either those base values that you have are aligned or they're kind of not. And when I started Faction, as I said, I knew nothing about business. I knew nothing about business. I was a freelancer. I was a ski bum. I'd travel the world and I'd got jobs here and there, and that was it. And my business partner was Harvard background, McKinsey. He'd taken a business public that was working in an industrial sector. And he was like, I'll run everything, you know, business. This is fine. This is what you do. This is how you raise cash. This is what a business plan is. This is what P&L is. This is what, you know, what shares are. And I was like, oh, okay, cool. And, you know, just because of the nature of the business, I had to focus on my role, which was brand, product, and marketing. And he had to focus on his, which is business and finance and all that. And, you know, so for many years, and we started getting external investment probably in about 2008 or so, like that. Loans, business loans, people are coming on board buying equity. And then we had our first major investment. So high net worth individuals, a London-based venture capital company, and a Swiss angel network.
All right.
In 2011, 2012. So they put in a couple of million, I think. And that was my first experience of like, oh, so this is what a board is. And this is what board members do. And this is what different share classes are. And at that point, you know, I'm still new. I'm still deep in product, deep in brand. And the business side, I'm kind of like, okay, this is what happens when you're on a conference call with 10 people and you're presenting to 60 people in a VC company in England, and you know, you're raising cash. But I didn't understand the implications of what those different share classes are. I didn't understand the implications of, you know, what happens when your equity gets diluted. I didn't understand the implications of how a share value changes over time. And, you know, there were some decisions being made that I wasn't 100% comfortable with, but I didn't really know any better. Things about how we employ people, how we deal with internal discussions or disagreements, etc. And it just wasn't something that I kind of had the opportunity to really get involved in, because we just didn't have time. You know, as I said on that post, I was working every day. I was working everywhere, no matter whether I was on holiday or on my
as
honeymoon,
you do,
whatever.
because you are, in a way, you are the business, you are the brand.
Yeah.
It's hard to differentiate, especially as a founder. People talk about, you know, work and life balance. That doesn't exist, especially as a founder. There's always something to do, and you want it to grow, so you put in the time, you put in the, you know, effort and the love and the energy. So of course that's what you do.
Yeah, exactly. And then so by 2017, we were under a hell of a lot of pressure. I'd worked for, as I said, 8 to 10 years without a salary, just surviving on nothing. And then a decent salary for 5 years. And the first time I had a salary in my life, you know, bought a car, as you do. Shit, man, I'm going to get a Range Rover. You know, I like had a salary. This is amazing. And then 2017, just there wasn't any one point in particular. There was just a couple of things that were said or incidents that happened where you're like, hang on, what's going on here? And, you know, I'd been on board meetings for 5 years by that point, but there were no discussions about brand and positioning and what we were trying to do with the business long term. And this is something we can talk about because this is really key when it comes to founders, is having an aligned vision about how you want your company to grow and where you want it to get to. Because my vision for what I wanted the company to be, I just love making products that made people happy. You know, I love making skis. I love making outerwear. If I just got paid a salary to do that and the business was small and just supported itself and kind of got going, and then we decided, hey, yeah, let's scale, that'd be great. That's one way of running a business. The other way of running a business is to go, well, no, to get investment in, to bring in a lot of money, we need to claim that we're going to be a 20 million business, a 50 million business, a 100 million business. And that is, it's a very different scenario, and it's a very different way of running a business than that first scenario. And I think unless as founders, you're both aligned exactly on what you're trying to do, it can get very dangerous. And what, unfortunately, for my position, my business partner was raising capital based on one vision, and that was very different from what my vision was. And by the time I'd kind of, you know, come around and kind of realize that, hang on, you know, we're massively in debt. We're having to promise higher and higher revenue growth just to get more capital in. You know, this isn't sustainable. This isn't, and I don't mean environmentally friendly, I mean business. Sustainable as a business. And by the time I raised all these issues, I don't want to say anything negative, but just I didn't have the right people, or there was already an investment structure and a board structure in the business which was aligned with one vision, and that vision wasn't mine. And it got to a point where, you know, we kind of butted heads, and at the end of the day, I raised a lot of issues. There are a lot of other issues about workplace, unfortunately, and it is Mental Health Week, so we can talk about these things. But like, you know, just subtle bullying over decades, which you don't notice. You really don't notice. You just think it's normal. And I just got to a point where I was exhausted and tired. I'm like, well, I've had enough of this, and I don't like being talked to that way. And so we need to talk about this in an environment where we can talk about it. And the mediation session was with the chairman of the board. And unfortunately, the chairman of the board and the board just went, we can't be bothered dealing with any of this. You got to go. And I'm like, what? Sorry. Yeah. And it was shattering. Like we'd that day after that phone call, we had to go and sign a mortgage, which we'd been applying for, you know, a year. And we had to pull out. We had to pull out of the mortgage. You know, we had a screaming 6-week-old baby in the back seat of the car while I'm trying to take this phone call. And a week before Christmas, I had a team of 20 people here, just down the valley in our office here. And I literally had to go, it's Friday. I've got to be out of this office by Tuesday, Wednesday next week. I'm sorry. You know, this is my team of people who I've hired. I've brought in, they're running under my direction. All the product lines, all the branding, all the messaging, all the communication was all under my daily supervision. And I just had to go, I'm sorry, I can't do anything about this. I've got to leave. I've got to pack my desk and go. And
there's so many things I want to talk about here, because this is insane, of course. And I'm almost crying because we've started to own clothing brands. We know we've, you know, dealt with a lot of founders, and so we kind of have heard some of the nuances of this story. But how did you handle just that first instance? Like, how did you, of course, mentally, how did you tackle it? What was the first thing you did? How did you just
I went straight into survival mode, and the first thing I could think of doing was, I didn't accept it. Mentally I did not accept it. In terms of, I was like, okay, this has happened. I need to find work. I need to do something different. Okay, so what do I do? What do I know? I know brand and communication and marketing, and I got a lot of friends here who are copywriters or filmers, something like that. I was like, what can I do? What can I do? Okay, let's start a marketing agency or something like that. Like, I didn't accept it. I literally didn't accept it at all, emotionally or anything. And I don't know if I have still, to be honest.
Can you
Like
ever
you
get
just go in
over a thing like
survival.
that? Can you ever get
Well,
over a thing like that without being bitter and always having that gut feeling that is kind of like tormenting you from the inside? Can you ever?
you've expressed that quite well. No, I don't know. And I think it is definitely now. I mean, it's 5 years later. I can look back and it's definitely a learning process. But I think one of the frustrating points is just that I instantly lost contact with my team of people, and people I'd worked with every day, and people were, I mean, shit, they all worked so hard and so passionately for very little money, all with this dream of building this thing in this brand.
Yeah.
And I think it's that point you're like, oh fuck, why did I bother? I could have just gone and worked for, I don't know, bored for the last 10 years and I would have earned more money.
Yeah.
But I probably wouldn't have had as much fun, let's be honest. But I don't know. I mean, the first thing I did was go get a lawyer. And that,
Did that help
got me a little bit.
in any way?
It did. So it basically extended Swiss termination agreements are quite simple. It's 3 months. That's it. You get 3 months, you go on. And so I got a lawyer, and you can't do much about that. But the board was, from one angle, the board was quite good, and we extended that for a period of time. So that was, went a little bit of a way to trying to find work, basically. But I'd never had a full-time job in my life. I'd never had a salary. I was a freelancer. And suddenly I had a wife and 2 kids, baby girls at home, and I'm like, well, how the hell do I support these guys without a salary? So having to start again and kind of go, okay, what do I do? How do I build it? What do I know? What value does that have? Who can I get in touch with to work that out? And that's been a long process. But what I did was throw myself into what I knew, and what I loved doing was designing products. And so about a couple of months later, through one of my friends convincing me, actually, I started a Kickstarter for an apparel brand called Ghosts, which unfortunately hasn't lasted much beyond the Kickstarter. But I knew how to do that. There were a couple of brands who had really strong success on Kickstarter. One called Cortez, actually, which is doing really well on there. And we raised about 60 grand, which was cool. Made the product, and I had become aware of a new process, which is solution dyeing. I'm not sure if you're familiar with that. So that's where they put the color into the plastic before it's extruded into the yarn, so you don't have to dye afterwards. And it's amazing. And you can combine that with recycled plastics as well, and suddenly you've got kind of this just one step forwards for, in my mind, what I love doing, which is just trying to do things which are more sustainable. And I won an innovation award at OR, Outdoor Retailer, for that in 2020. And then this COVID hit, and everything kind of went on hold. I had some funding lined up for that, and literally Thursday they're like, yeah, let's go ahead, this is gonna be great, we'll put a couple of $100,000 in, we'll make this work. And then Monday they were like, actually COVID seems to be way harsher than we initially thought, we might just have to put this on hold. And so that went on hold. And I was doing little bits.
Sorry, I just have to go back one step again to scenario 2017. I mean, just looking and hearing it from the outside, it sounds so wrong. When you're the founder, you're the one that built up this company, and then you are the one that is let go. So of course when you bring in investors, they're gonna take a piece of the company, they're gonna get shares. But is there if you would have to redo it again, or if you have a recommendation to other founders, is there a way to protect yourself better in a scenario like this?
Like, what are a couple of things that people could have in their toolbox if something like this happens, or to actually even prevent it from happening?
That's a really good point. I think what I found, most people who start businesses like this in this area, and we're talking outdoor sports, action sports, whatever, fashion, tend to be creatives. They tend to be people who come up with an idea, and a lovely idea, or a way of expressing themselves through the objects. And that's what's most important. And it's fantastic. And you need to cherish that, and you need to protect that. But at some point, you also need some kind of advice or some kind of structure around you to kind of say, hey, what you do is amazing, but legally, how are you going to actually control that and control your ownership, your IP of what you do? And also, you need to have people sympathetic around you who can say, okay, we need to build a business structure that supports you doing that, but also it needs to have a long-term vision to it. And I think if you are a business founder and you are from the creative side, trying to find anybody you can talk to who has a legal background or a business background, who is independent and outside of the business, to give you advice during the stages of your journey. Because every time you raise cash, it comes with obligations. Every time someone comes on board as a partner or someone comes on board as a board member or anything like that, there are pros and cons to it. And so I was very much at the point when we raised cash, it was like, where can we find money? Where can we find money? This person wants to give us money. Great, let's get it in. There was no understanding of the repercussions of that money coming in. I didn't understand debt. I didn't understand convertible notes, for example. And I bet probably a lot of people out there don't understand what a convertible note is. So that's basically a loan, which if it doesn't get repaid, turns into equity. So with every one of the years that we did these things to get money, I was losing equity. I was getting diluted because we couldn't pay back the loans, so they'd convert to equity. So every year you're just losing equity, which means if you're losing equity, you're also losing power. You're losing, it depends on the class of shares. But this is the next thing. When you get investment in, generally what happens is every subsequent round of investment, and we're talking large amounts here, we're talking millions, 500,000, million, 2 million, etc. investment. Once that type of scale investment comes in, every person who invests at a point after the founders wants better rights to their shares, i.e., if things go wrong, they get preferentially treated to anyone who invested beforehand. And I didn't understand this. I didn't know what was going on. We had no other option. We were broke. We needed cash in to support the business.
So the business was never profitable when you were there?
This was never profitable. Nope. And this was a choice.
Yeah. But how did that thinking go? Did you never plan for, dudes, we're losing money, we're just bleeding money, when are we going to put a plan to actually stop the bleeding and start making money as a business should?
Yes, this is sounding like one big clusterfuck right now, isn't it? Excuse my language. But yeah, this is the point. What I was talking about earlier, you have two different ways to grow a business. One is you do it as lean as you can. You bootstrap it. You get to the point where your product is out there, it is selling, and you're clean, you don't have debt, everything's okay. And at that point, you can get investment and you can scale it. At that point, you lose equity, someone comes on board, hopefully you bring investment, which also has connections. So it's not just what I call blind cash. It's not just, here's cash, do something with it. Oh, I get a board seat, but I'm from fintech. I don't know anything about apparel. So whatever. Like, that's dangerous money. Useful money is money that comes in and helps you scale an idea you already have from a solid financial position and actually brings networks in or advice from a related industry, which can actually, you can turn to and you can kind of go, this shit's happened, what do I do? And hopefully then a point where they go, oh, I know this person we can call, or, hey, I was in a similar position, you can do this. But that's not the situation we ended up in. And that was a choice by my business partner over the years. It was probably shared with me. I have no idea. I didn't understand any of it. And you get to a point where 10 years later, you're like, hang on, we're in a position where we're in massive amounts of debt. We've got to raise money to pay off debt. We've got to raise money to cover our losses. And the only way we can do that is by claiming that our business is going to get bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. And the risk becomes greater, and the problems become greater. And that was a lot of why this incident happened, was that I was sitting there kind of going, this doesn't make any sense. Like, why can't we just strip everything back, get to break even, clear all our debt out, and then work out how to scale? And that, unfortunately, by that point, the structure that was around me, the legal structure, the share structure, the debt structure, the board, was in a completely different place. And so, do I have to take I have to take responsibility for that. I have to sit there and say I should have put time and effort into understanding this earlier on, but I didn't. So at some point you kind of have to say, well, maybe part of that's my own fault. But going back to kind of founders, and hopefully what we're talking to here are people who are in kind of smaller stages of the business, where you can sit there and you can kind of go, okay, I'm considering getting investment. What does that mean? And
exactly.
But a lot of the time when you're getting investment, you're not in that position. A lot of the time you're like, shit, I got to pay the supplier 50 grand. How do I get 50 grand? And so you take what you can find, or you borrow it. You call your sister up and you go, can I borrow 10 grand?
How has that mentality from what happened with fashion and to what then later happened, or how you set up the second brand? What did you want to do different, and how did you approach it?
So what I've done, and actually I'm in the middle of fundraising for another project at the moment, and it's taken a long time because of this scenario. I want to make sure that what we have is a shareholders agreement that I understand, that is simple, that protects me and protects them. Investment is a two-sided coin. They get something out of it, you get something out of it. That's the whole point.
It is to the best interest of the brand as well.
Exactly.
Not just the shareholders.
Yeah.
And the end consumer.
Yeah. But I think I've started working with a different group of people. So when I left Faction, I just started talking to everybody. I started calling up friends I hadn't seen in a long time, or people in the industry that I'd maybe met once at a trade show or something, and gone, hey, what are you doing? How can I learn from you, your experience, etc. And I think what that has meant is that I definitely filter out things that I kind of flag early on as probably won't be beneficial to the business or myself. You definitely get people kind of going, oh, I've got cash, want some cash. And you're like, no, hang on. And I've definitely taken time to get to know people before I bring them on as investors, or before we talk about investment, or if they get introduced, or if I meet them as a potential investor, I take time with them to understand what they want to do and where they come from. And what I've ended up doing actually with a group in the US called Otherwild is I've come on board with them as an advisor to, cool. So what they do is they're quite new, but what they do is they invest in what we call medium-sized businesses. So 5 to 10, 15 million in revenue, with the aim of helping them scale. But their whole kind of manifesto is to support founders, is that the key is that idea, the creativity and the concept and the vision that the founders have is the thing that we're trying to actually make sure is protected and is really important. And that's something I didn't really understand, 10, 15 years ago. I was like, I've got this idea and oh my God, someone actually wants to kind of give me some money for that, great. But I didn't really value how special the idea was versus the value that the money would bring to me, kind of thing. Because you're desperate when you're starting a business. You're desperate. You're just desperate to make ends meet. You're desperate to pay rent. You're desperate to pay a supplier, or your friend who does filming for you, who's like, can I get some money for that? You're like, oh yeah, sorry. And so now I'm just in a different space of how I see business structure and how I work with Otherwild to actually go in and analyze P&Ls. I go and analyze debt structure. I go and I analyze supply chains, because I know if that stuff isn't right, there's no way that the business is going to be able to support the vision of the founder. And that's really what's key, I think. And so I think, going back a step, Klaus, thank you.
Yeah.
This whole idea that if you're starting a business and you need help, and everyone needs help starting a business, what they say, a child doesn't get raised, a child gets raised by not a family, a town. It takes a town to raise a family. It takes a town to run a business. It really does. Your friends get involved, your family gets involved, like everyone gets involved in your business and your idea, and it's amazing and fantastic. But if someone is actually coming on board as a partner, the key thing for me would be to sit there and say, okay, where do we want to be in 5 years' time? Where do we want to be in 10 years' time? And everyone's like, I want to be $100 million business. And you're like, yeah, that's great. If that happens, that would be fantastic. But realistically speaking, do we just want to get to the point where there's 2 or 3 employees and we're happy and we're creating the things we want to create and we have happy customers and they're coming back to us and, you know, we've got some support around us? That's great. And if that is what you want, then that's fantastic and that can work. But if one of you is happy with that and the other one wants to be VF, it's going to cause a lot of problems all the way down the line.
So at the moment, when you mentioned that you're looking at different things and you have your little checklist for when you bring people on, your little radars app, what are you looking for? Like, what are your, of course, they need to be kind of matching your own vibe, even though they have different skills, but what are you looking for? What's on your checklist?
You know what? It's that simple. It's that simple. When you sit down with that person and you gel with them. No, someone actually once said to me, it's like, could you be in a car with them for 8 hours? Could you drive to Sweden and back with them and get along? And frankly, that probably is the most important thing. Like, you know, it doesn't matter if you're a creative and they're a CFO or they're, you know, or they run factories, whatever. It doesn't matter. Like, if you can see complementary values and complementary just personality types, it actually works. It actually makes things so much better. I mean, I don't want to go back into my past as well, but there were flags early on and I just ignored them because I didn't know anything about business. I didn't know anybody in business. And I was like, that's a bit weird, but I'll just ignore that, you know. And it really is that checklist now really is, if I have to talk to this person every week for, you know, X amount of hours a day, am I going to be happy to pick up the phone to them? Or am I going to go, oh God, I've got to answer to this person or talk to this person again? Like, that is actually enough for me. Because as a team of founders or as a group, and you know this yourselves, as you get thrown into a business, you have to learn so much beyond your scope of understanding. And you have to deal with things that you never thought you'd have to deal with before. And learn things. And both of you are in that position. You know, maybe that person is an expert in one particular thing, Excel files, you know, shit like that, fun stuff. But like, they're going to learn and grow as you learn and grow as well. So the values that you have and the personality types you have, if they're complementary, you know, it's going to work a lot better than just saying, okay, that person's really good at this one thing, which we need as a business, but I can't see them doing anything else beyond that, or I can't have a kind of a friendly, just respectful, enjoyable relationship with that person.
Yeah. Totally. So basically have the same goals, have the same vision, have different skill sets, but have similar, how should I say?
Values.
Yeah. Values are really important. And I think the thing nowadays is, again, I knew when I started Faction, it was pre-social media, it was pre-LinkedIn, it was pre any type of stuff like that. And now, if I was starting a business now, I would go straight on LinkedIn and go, guys, I'm starting this type of business. I need a mentor, or I need someone who can give me some type of impartial guidance, who has experience, who's done it before. Because, you know, people like myself or people who've built businesses, one of the most special things that we can get that strokes our ego is going, well, give me your advice, you know, like talk. I mean, I'm happy to talk to anybody starts a business. They want to call me up and go, hey, I've done this, I've gotten to this position, what should I do next? And I do that for a couple of businesses. So I help kind of mentor a couple of guys, and they call me up once a month and go, I've got into this position, what do I do? And you kind of go, oh shit. But most of the time you go, oh no, you know, call this person, this person will help you with that. I'll introduce you to this sales network over here, or there's this PR person you can call. But you know, actually reaching out and saying, I need help, or can anybody point me in the direction of anybody who's learned how to do PR in Norway? You know, the connections are there, and people want to help each other, and people like being able to share what they do and their experiences.
But to be able to do that, you have to be really kind of like take a good look at your strengths, your weaknesses, also what you like to do, what you hate to do, and basically look at yourself from an outside perspective. Because I, for sure, with you now, if when in your new venture, you're definitely gonna have your business hat on, probably way more than ever, and not just your creative hat. So talk a little bit about, being able to kind of looking into both yourself and kind of what you've learned from your previous journey, of course, with Faction, where you're like, no, I'm doing product, I'm focusing on this, and kind of like don't really caring. But now it's actually having to basically evaluate through your journey, evaluate everything you've done and kind of like, how can I do this better? How can I not make this happen again? And how can I, like make sure that it's a beautiful journey from now on?
Well, I have two good friends who are lawyers, so that helps.
All right, that's good.
No, it definitely, taking the time to understand the implications of any type of legal agreement is really important. And you sit there and you think, oh God, that's a pain in the ass. But actually, lawyers are actually really friendly people and they're really nice. And they're there to help you too. And some of them aren't that costly. But I think actually, one thing you touched on there is like, how would you grow a business from scratch again now, knowing what I do now? And the one thing that I do completely differently now, which might contradict some of if you're creative, if you're starting a fashion brand or something, or you're an artist and you just want to kind of get some designs and ideas on paper or on a t-shirt, etc., that's a very different viewpoint from me, which is almost, I hate to say it, but I'm almost analytical in the fact that as a product designer, I just like making products, and it could literally be anything, frankly, as long as I'm passionate about it and I use it every day and I love it and it helps me do something. So, I found it really easy to adapt it to outerwear because it was something I used every day. It helped me do something I love, i.e. skiing, and it helped other people kind of find freedom. And so for me to adapt it to outerwear was fairly straightforward. And now I find myself, so obviously I manage outerwear and hard goods for Candide, but I also have an eyewear brand, which I've just started. And that came out because of exactly what you're talking about. I'm at a point now, I just turned 50, where I'm not going to spend 10 years building a brand. I can't afford to. I have a family. Like I am creative and I have ways of expressing my creativity, but I'm not just going to kind of go, oh, I've got this idea for a brand. I'll just put it out there. Like, now I work the other way. I talk to retailers, I talk to distributors, I talk to reps, and I go, what's happening in your region? What's happening in your area? What type of products are you struggling?
Where are the gaps?
What products and categories? Where are the gaps? Yeah, exactly. What products and categories aren't adopting any environmentally friendly standards or sustainability processes or anything? Because that's really, really important for me. Living in the mountains, living in Verbier, every year you see the snow changing, you see the weather changing, you're like, oh shit. It's real here. And as a target group that you can communicate with, people who practice outdoor sports are really just, as a percentage of those people, way more sensitive to what's happening environmentally than if you live in London or something like that, for example, just as a general thing. And so actually how I've started the eyewear brand that I'm doing is through a whole heap of conversations with the guys. And so I know the CEO and the head of product there really well. And I was talking to them, me and a friend were talking to them about the trend for private labels. So nowadays what you tend to find, I'm not sure if you're aware of Montec and Dope. So that's a private label by Dope Store. Sorry, not Dope Store, Ride Store. And a lot of these stores now, you don't even realize, have a lot of private labels that they slot in alongside the brands that they sell. And so I was talking to this retailer over in Germany, and they were kind of saying, like, we want to do private labels. I'm like, well, I can, I love thinking of brand names and ideas and positioning. So, yeah, I'll do that. And then in the end, they were like, well, actually, we don't have really the time and energy to do that. If these are the categories that we're looking for products in, these are the price points we want to hit. If you can make that, we'll buy you minimums. And as someone starting a business, and this is something we haven't talked about, just trying to cover your minimums is pretty much the most key thing you can do. And also having a sales channel is if you've got those two things, you're years ahead than just starting from scratch, kind of going, I've got this product, how do I actually get it out there? So now if I'm looking at projects, the first thing I look at is where the product fits in terms of the opportunities within the marketplace and what the sales channels available to us are and how easy they are to access and where they are. And then, I don't just kind of sit there and go, I'm just going to design to a price point. I'm just going to design to that chain. Like, there's got to be part of me in it. There's got to be passion there for what I'm doing. There's got to be creativity and expression in there as well. And it's a two-way street. The retailer will come to us and say, hey, these are the price points we want to hit. These are the styles we want. And we kind of go, well, that's great. But this is actually what's happening in the market. This is what, if I'm looking at 2-year trends, 3 years trends, this is where we need to be. Take those, but can you also please take these products and these products? And it's it's a conversation that we have together, and they support that, and that builds a stronger relationship. And then the idea is that we take that, and then I'm kind of talking to other markets for distributors I know and retailers I know, and looking at how we get the right funding in place to take that next journey.
I mean, just listening to your story, you started out as a creative person. You did product design, was branding. You didn't know anything about business, and now you've done this journey. So you have your business hat on, but you still talk about your passion for creativity. How do you balance this today, being a business leader? And you have to talk about, with legal persons, it's about distribution, it's about business strategy. Can you maintain being both a creative person and a business person at the same time?
You know what? I never thought you could. When I was younger, I was like, well, no, you're either a creative or you're a business person. And now I've kind of been through that process. I actually understand that the business side is there to support and protect the creative side, and vice versa. The creative side, without the creative side, there are no businesses. There is nothing to protect, and there is nothing to grow. And that is also when now I talk to potential investors or partners, or the work I do for Otherwild in actually going and talking to other businesses that might require some investment, is understanding the founder journey, and kind of understanding that both can exist together. But I've always kind of been that half. My dad was an applied chemist, a research scientist, and a university lecturer, and my mom was a writer and a historian, actually, like local histories and things like that. And my family as well, I've got 3 older sisters, and there is that juxtaposition in my family of the creative side and then the analytical, instructional side as well. And you're right though, Klaus, I've always internally had a bit of a dilemma of like, well, I'll do this creatively and then I'll assess it. And you're like, no, just don't assess it. Just let it out and let it happen. Yeah. And then the other side of it kind of going, right, analytically, we need to do this. And then kind of going, well, where does the creative bit fit? And it did actually, we do shareholder reports, we do board meetings. And one of the things I used to get really pissed off about was the fact that we would never talk about brand. We would never talk about our target market. We'd never talk about the experiences that people were having and our long-term vision for the brand and the product, the creative side. And it took me years, and it's only now I would feel comfortable in a board meeting or something, kind of while everyone's talking about margins, and I'd be going, hang on, we need to talk about brand, and we need to talk about, where the business is heading as a whole. And a lot of times in board meetings, even now, that people are still like, oh, well, I don't even understand what a brand is, let alone talk about it. So actually, I'm quite enjoying now that juxtaposition between, being able to actually let my analytical side go and look at P&Ls and look at 5-year cash flows and look at deal structures, and actually be able to take what I've learned from my own experience and apply that to another business and go, actually, we need to talk about this, and then be able to step back and go, right, on the creative side, your communication's not working, or this copy, which is your lead for a campaign, isn't working, or the visuals aren't actually resonating with your target audience. I don't know. I just seem to find it quite fun doing both angles to it. I don't know.
It sounds like the optimal situation actually to be having that perspective over everything in the business.
Yeah, well, I've never thought about it before. So thank you very much for raising it as a topic. Actually, I've never. No,
really, because you hear about this journey and you see this with other founders. They start out with, being just, maybe the designer, and that's what their passion is all about. And then they do this journey, and voluntarily or involuntarily, they turn into this CEO or business person. So they don't have any time. They don't spend any time doing the designs anymore. And I also talk to people and founders that, they go back, they start something again just to, remember, okay, I started this because I had a passion for creativity, being a designer. But it's fantastic to hear how you can, you turn it into something positive. It's not either or, it's it can coexist.
Yeah, it can. That's a really interesting point. I remember talking, so I must have been like 14 years old, right? And all I did was draw cars. Okay, that's how I ended up in product design. Was when I was a teenager, I just drew cars, and that sounds a bit dull when you talk about it, but that's what I love doing. And at the age of 14, I went and saw the head of design at General Motors in Australia. So it's this company called Holden in Australia, which unfortunately isn't there anymore. And I went and did it, and I showed him what I did, and he's like, "Well, you're a designer." And I'm like 14. I'm like, "What?" He's like, "Yeah, this is you're a designer." And he was telling me about how the thing that he found most frustrating was that now he ran a team and he couldn't get the opportunity to design himself. And I was like, oh shit, and I that's always stuck with me, because even at Faction, maybe that was one of my downfalls at Faction, was that I was trying to run 3 different brands and run creative and marketing and the brand as well as be kind of on the board member side of things. But I still made sure that I was going to be the one who started the design process, even if other people came in, and even if other people like helped out along the way, or we had freelancers involved, and we did, and it was great. But for me, the whole reason I was building that business was to design things. That's what why I get up in the morning, really, and what kind of floats my boat, as you say. I don't know if that's a Swedish expression.
We get you. We get what you're trying to say.
Yeah.
I want to take it. I want to go backwards a little bit to what you just said. You were talking about retail, and you discussing and talking and kind of reverse engineering the entire process. Now everybody's going D2C. Let's go D2C, because we go direct to consumer. We got these fat margins and big business from the beginning. We can control everything. We can have direct communication with the customer, big money in the bank. But it's not actually like that, and I find it extremely interesting now that your new ventures are starting and you're basing it on retail and that type of distribution. Talk to me a little bit about that.
Oh, it's a really good topic, because I think there's a lot of confusion out there, and it varies by market as well, and it varies by scale of business. So let's just focus on apparel, since our listeners are mainly in apparel, but just so kind of have no, but so I'm going to make a really sweeping statement right now and
go ahead.
Don't start a D2C business right now. Unless you have $1 million in the bank to basically throw into marketing. We always start Faction. When Faction started, we tried to go D2C. We wanted to go D2C. A load of other people around me kind of started D2C businesses as well. And, 10 years ago, 15 years ago, if you had the money, you could kind of do it. But in the last, iOS 14 updates, all that stuff, it's made the cost of acquisition so much higher. It's made the competition so much more expensive. So if you're doing Google ads, Google shopping, Google search, the cost of acquisition is so much higher than it was. If you only have a little bit of money to start a business right now, you have to create so much content to actually kind of break through all the noise. You have to put so much into marketing that, I'm looking at businesses and with Otherwild assessing these businesses, people are throwing 50% of their revenue budget into marketing, because that's what you have to do if you're going to start a D2C brand. Unless you already are at the 5-10 million stage and you have $1 million marketing budget, that will be fine. I know this sounds really counterintuitive, but when you're big and you have momentum and you have enough money to throw at something, the wheel turns a lot quicker and a lot easier than it does when you only have a little bit of money. And you have to do everything yourself, So what I would recommend, if you're starting a small business now, there are also a lot of other opportunities out there that there weren't 10 years ago. Fair, Anchor, Fairling, there are ways that you can use marketplaces, B2B marketplaces as well, which are online, where you can actually get your product into retail, or you can use marketplaces which sell multiple brands online and then you deliver, if you see what I mean. I'm not sure if this is getting too technical or not.
Go ahead. This is what this podcast is about. It's about getting tactical, giving people tangible advice, not just fluffy, cute words.
Yeah.
So go on. The more tactical, the better.
Cool. Because if you only have a small amount of budget, sitting there and kind of go, well, I can build a Shopify site, I can use a template, and my God, e-commerce now is so much easier than it was 10 years ago. 10 years ago, we were throwing 100 grand pounds at an agency in London to build us an e-commerce site, which only half worked. And you'd have a $5 grand a month management fee. Now, Shopify, $20 a month, choose a template for $200. You could do multiple currencies, multiple languages, everything. It is amazing. But just having a website up there doesn't sell product. That's like the last step of everything. You have to find ways to get your product and your brand out there. And if you have those networks, I mean, I'm fairly lucky. I know that I can call someone in PR and 10 different magazines in Europe, North America, Australasia, London, and I know the editors, and I can get on the phone with the PR person and go, can you get me into this magazine, this magazine? And I've known them long enough, and I've got those relationships that it's fairly straightforward. But if you're doing that from nothing, you've got to pay for all of that. And for someone to actually purchase a product, they need to be aware of it. They need to trust it. They need to see it again and again. I mean, there's some statistic about having to see a brand 7 times before you purchase, or having 7 touch points to a brand before you purchase. And for a small business, if you're just trying to design a product and get a product made, that is hard enough. To then go and actually have to produce content every day, put that out on TikTok, Instagram, Pinterest, Facebook. It's such a challenging task. And then you end up going, well, I've got to do this, so I'll go and employ someone to copyright for me, or I'll employ a photographer, and then I'll employ this person. And in the end, it still doesn't give any guaranteed cash flow. And what you need as a small business is access to capital to fund inventory generally. So trying to do that by yourself, and there are a lot of companies, I've been looking into a lot of companies lately who claim to give inventory financing on good terms for D2C only businesses. But in all the ones I've looked into, there are cliffs. So what I mean is, they'll say, oh yeah, you can pay for 6 months, and then at the end of the 6 months, you've got to pay 80% of the original loan back. And if you're borrowing 10 grand, 20 grand, 30 grand, and you suddenly have a cliff after 6 months where you've just paid $200 a week, a month or whatever, and then suddenly you owe 8 grand, that doesn't work in a business that needs sustainable cash flow. So one of the things about actually talking to retailers direct, and it can be any retailer, if you're starting a t-shirt brand, or you're starting an outerwear brand, and there's a clothes store in your town, or I'm talking about wherever you are, literally start talking to retailers, because they will give you honest feedback. They will talk to you about the quality, the positioning, the price point, whether there's a market or not. And you need to know whether there's a market, because as soon as you get orders from retailers, for example, you can take that to a bank, or you can take that to private investment, and you can say, I've got this order, but I need 10 grand to cover it. Can you give me a loan for 10 grand? You'll get your money back at that date when that person receives it, and everybody's happy. And really, if you're trying to bootstrap, for me, that's the only way I know to grow a business, is having access to capital that doesn't take equity, that you're not saying, oh, I need 10 grand to pay for, 1,000 t-shirts. Shit, I'm going to have to give away 20% of my business. Like, no, you don't want to give away your business. You don't want to give away equity for inventory financing ever. Basically.
This was such fantastic advice. It's a little bit controversial, because this is not exactly what you hear out there. And I love that it's like that. And I love that you're backing it up with facts and that, I mean, you're talking to a lot of shop owners, and you know what they want. And so you just have to kind of, again, reverse engineer instead of creating something and putting it out there and hoping people might like it. And then you've wasted all your savings. You've got other people's money. You've invested it as well. And you don't know if it's going to fly or not.
Well, I've lived through that stage about where D2C first started, brands were like, exactly, just said, oh my God, I can take all the margin. I can go direct to a customer. So the customer comes to me and I get their loyalty and I get their interaction and they'll buy from me again. And the brands are all like, yeah, fuck you, stores. Sorry for my language. But, and you're like, but I like stores. I like browsing in stores. And when you come from a small town like Verbier, for example, or any ski resort, the retailer is really the heart and soul of the town. You go into them every couple of weeks, you service your skis, you get something fixed, you need a pair of goggles. Like your friends are the people who run these stores. And if those stores don't exist, there's kind of nothing else, you know. I know that sounds strange, but like, and I order from Zalando. God damn, you know, I can order 3 things from Zalando. They're here tomorrow. I pick one of them I like, I send the other 2 back, and that is horrendous as a consumer and as, you know, for sustainability, etc. But like, for some things that's good, but for me, for outdoor brands, action sport brands, and even fashion as well, and mainstream high street, you know, kind of brands, having relationships with retail is really important because they're stable. You know, they've been there for 10 years, 20 years, 30 years. They know what's happening. They see trends. The more you work with them, the better. And there was massive, what we call channel conflict. So 10 years ago, 15 years ago, there was a thing called Shopatron in the States, which basically tried to let you, kind of like click and collect. You would order your product online, and then if a store in the region where that customer was had that product, they would get the opportunity to deliver it. And it was so complex. And we tried to use it, but it was amazingly complex. But there was a time when retailers would literally go, are you selling online? And you'd say yes. And they go, well, we don't want to talk to you. And that was 10 years ago. But now retailers still want to know, well, are you selling online? And they're kind of like, okay, you're selling online. We get it. But you can respect that relationship. You can say, okay, well, we're not going to do clearances or discounts before, for example, in winter sports, we're not going to do discounts until after February 1st, because the retailer who has pre-ordered your product and only gets it in December only has 2 months to sell the product. So if you're getting the product online in August and discounting it in November, you've basically screwed over all your retailers, and the retailers will never reorder from you again. And it's not that complex, you know, it's basic respect for each stage in that sales chain, and basic respect for the fact that, you know, retailers ordered from you, they need the opportunity to sell the product. Just hold your price for until they want a discount. You know,
how are you approaching your collections? Are you approaching the collection like one collection, the same collection is sold online, the same collection goes to the retailers? Yep. Or are you experimenting? What are your tips there? Is it good to have certain things exclusive for retail so it attracts that customer, and something exclusive only for you? Would you experiment? Tell me a little bit about that.
Well, if we're talking about outerwear specifically, the lead times for production are so much, the brand has to take a risk on what they order before they have retail orders. So I think what tends to happen is, I mean, some brands do things where they'll have a product that they just make, maybe they use leftover fabrics, or maybe they do a little capsule that they just want to have for themselves. Or we used to do collabs between the skis. We had a collab with Dragon, the goggle brand. So we had a little capsule collection that we'd sell D2C, they'd sell D2C, and that kind of stuff's cool. That kind of stuff's fun. But what you tend to find now is it's getting really dangerous for brands, because especially in the last couple of years, and you would have seen this, COVID, supply chains, all that, it's pushing lead times so long that you have to order fabric in, you know, we had to do a pre-order for fabric in October or something, and normally it's December. And then you have to place your first PO for production in December, and you're like, well, the retailers haven't even seen it yet. They're not going to place an order to February, so you're ordering blind. And different brands are doing different things. Some brands are pressuring retailers into ordering before they've even opened their stores for the following winter, which is kind of horrendous. But you know, big brands can afford to do that. Patagonia, North Face, etc., can afford to push their retailers into that, whereas small brands have to take a risk. And I think that's what you find. You always tend to find that you do a sample run, you have a line plan, you do a sample run, you do X amount of colors, and by the time it actually goes to the retailers and you get pre-orders, you've chopped one style and you've chopped two colors because for some reason no one liked them. And that's just it. And I think what you're finding now is that brands have to take that risk. So if they believe in a color or something and it doesn't sell through, they don't get pre-orders from retailers, then you end up selling it online. And there's ways you can work around that. You can say it's a limited edition colorway, or it's a special colorway, or it's, just something for us. And then the fact that the retailers didn't like it, I mean, we still like it. There's still customers out there that you can reach. But again, as long as you're respecting that relationship and you're not trying to undercut what a retailer does and what a retailer is special for. I mean, I think a lot of people also don't understand how to build brands through retailers. A lot of people just give the brand to the retailers, they pre-order it, and then they leave it.
Yeah.
And they don't actually understand that they need to be going in there and visiting. They need to be seeing how sell-through is going. They need to be looking at what opportunities there are for windows. I mean, what you can do to train your staff, what you can do to incentivize the staff. There's a lot you can do with retail that in this industry, it feels like a lot of people aren't doing. And a lot of the retailers are open and saying they're not getting the support from brands, which you just would automatically think that they would get, I don't know, but that's my experience.
That's really, really good advice. And this kind of touches, of course, on cash flow. A lot of brands have, of course, a hard time with cash flow. Any recommendations, suggestions, tips, hidden, gems that you would share on how to tackle cash flows and
sell more quicker.
Yes.
Yeah.
And have money in the bank.
Yeah, just have a lot of money. I think that's the easiest way to do it. I mean, that is the thing. Cash flow, no matter what you forecast for cash flow, no matter what you forecast for how much you'll need, you will always be out. You will always be wrong by 15%. And even when you forecast cash flow, i.e. a store should get a delivery by one date and then it should pay by this date, it's going to be out by 30 days, 60 days. And you are finding in these times we're seeing a lot of inventory in retail as well. So it means that retailers aren't selling through as quickly as they used to. And that's pushing their cash flow out. So retailers are asking for longer terms. And by terms, I mean, they get a delivery on one date and then it's either 30 days or 60 days or 90 days when they have to pay for the product. And some brands are offering 90-day terms. And as a small business, that's impossible to deal with. And some brands offer discounts to try and incentivize retailers to pay faster, etc. Cash flow is always tricky, and the only experience I have in that is that you always need more than you think. I'm not sure how constructive advice that is, but literally, I've built entire P&Ls. I work with companies who've experienced in what they do, and they forecast they need X amount of cash by this date. And it'll always miss.
So
That's
anything that founders can think about and to try to kind of make it a little bit more accurate, or any advice that you would have on that?
I think one thing we're seeing at the moment is the abolishment of seasons, which is actually really good. So we went from a situation where, years ago, products would last 2, 3, 4 years. You'd see the same product, you'd be able to go into that store and go, I saw that last year, I'd like to buy that. And you could do that. And then in the last decade or 15 years, I don't know, we just ended up in this roller coaster of new product, entirely redesigned product, not just a new colorway, redesigned product every single year, hard goods and outerwear. And it's just not sustainable. Maybe the fashion industry can do that, but in outerwear, you just can't do it. We have 18-month timelines, development timelines. I run a 24-month timeline, development timeline with Candide, because we take time. We want to take time to do all the details right. And we need time with the product. We need to test the product.
Testing, yeah.
Oh my God, what's testing? I don't know, that didn't happen 5 years ago. But actually, non-seasonal product, and we're seeing a lot of mainstream brands, Mammut, guys like that, do shift from 80% seasonal product to 20% evergreen, or what I call, product that lasts year on year. And now it's shifting the other way. We're seeing 60% evergreen, 40% annual product, and even getting up to 80-20. And for me, that's fantastic, because it means the retailer doesn't have this 2-month window to sell. They can go, oh, I didn't sell it this year. Well, it's still valuable. I'll sell it next year, at full price. And it means
from a brand perspective, the brand value doesn't decrease. You always see it on sales. You're like, oh, that's a cheap brand. Nobody wants to buy.
Yeah, exactly. So we can indeed, from the start, we're doing 2-year seasons when we're not changing anything year on year. I mean, maybe we'll tweak a color or something like that if we really feel we need to. But we just set this target of saying, no, we're just going to stay with this product because we want people to be able to learn about the product, see the product, aspire to have the product, hopefully, and then be able to find it when they can. And I think that actually changes the game in a lot of ways. And then also resale and end of life. So resale is something that is slowly being adopted. And I was chatting to someone on Trove this morning, actually. I said some uneducated comments, unfortunately, and he gave me some insight into it. And it was just really good to see that a lot of brands are adopting resale, and we're seeing a lot of advancements in end-of-life collection and recycling. Finisterre have just launched a new program whereby they're making buttons out of old clothing. So they're able to kind of reprocess that. And that's what I'm looking to do with the eyewear brand. Actually, we're looking at recycling a lot of hard goods. So products like ski boots, things that lie around for ages, you can actually take them, recycle them, put them into a new product. And, my dream would be to create, sorry, I've gone off on another tangent. My dream is to localize, basically, manufacturing. Australia, when I was younger doing product design in Australia, I was really frustrated that we're a nation of people who mine something out of the ground and we ship it to Asia, and then Asia makes something out of it and sells it back to us. It's just the stupidest thing I've ever seen. But it happens everywhere. And for whatever reason, there are just different countries have different skill sets and different abilities to create different products. And it's been a fantastic process of, being able to work with factories in different places. I work with factories all through Asia, all through Europe, North America, etc. And, different ones are good at different things, which is fantastic. But I want to get to a point where suddenly, we're making the raw material here, we're recycling, or we're making it from recycled product here. We're actually making the product here, using the product here. And then at the end of life, we collect it and recycle it again. It becomes a closed loop. Because one of the things, so going through the process with Ghosts of looking into plastic waste, solution dyeing, all that kind of stuff, you just realize how much waste is already there. There is so much plastic waste out there already. And when I'm saying there, I mean it's in Bangladesh, and it's in Ghana, and it's in Vietnam. There's so much stuff already there that we can use and we should be using and collecting. We just need to find ways to actually empower those people. We need to find ways to make sure that the designers understand what they can access and how they can access it. And then, up to us to kind of close that loop and make sure that what we're doing for the long term, and I'm talking 10, 20, 30 years here, is creating actual sustainable local infrastructures. And that's gone way beyond the scope of our planned conversation, but that's that's so kind of my long-term dream.
That's so relevant.
But it is, and again, this kind of ties back into this. Could be this wherever you are in the world and wherever founders are. It could be a small business, but still employing a lot of hundreds of local people. It's still a good business. It doesn't need to be thousands of employees throughout wherever, and paying them 50 cents per hour. It can coexist together with the long goal of the brand, with the vision and all that, but also to make sure that the local community is a part of the brand as well, and it's a story by itself. So I find that extremely important, and you're seeing brands here and there kind of talking more about this. And I think eventually, of course, the hardship is because of the talent and the skill can sometimes be not there, because of course the skill is grouped around the world with the manufacturers and with the suppliers. But if there could be, it's an ideal solution, I find, kind of going back to how things were done hundreds of years ago. You had the sheep, and then you had someone knitting, and then you had the sweaters that was sold at the market, and then it was brought back in. So that
It's great. No, and I know it's quite difficult at the moment, I find, in the world, because there's so much turmoil. And going through COVID, and then Ukraine and everything. You're like, oh God, when are we going to find some stability? But actually, what I see happening is really positive movements, i.e., in the States, they're talking about onboarding a lot of local manufacturing. And there are massive communities in the States who used to make denim, all down the West Coast, and they don't do it anymore. And it's going to take 5-10 years to retrain people, but there needs to be investment in that. But you kind of go, oh, actually, it is going to happen. And obviously, we've worked with Asian suppliers for fabrics and factories, and I have great relationships with a lot of them. But I would really like to see better facilities in Europe. There's definitely fabrics made locally, and there's a couple of outerwear factories, but I think it's going to take time for just the amount of skill in this area to match what there already is in Asia. Correct me if I'm wrong. If anyone's listening to that and has some great contacts at great factories in Europe, wicked. But that's what I'd love to be able to do, is just see that kind of journey and that transition happen to things, being made locally. Simple, really.
Yeah. Let's wish for that.
Yeah.
And work for that as well.
Such a great conversation.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, thank you. Thank you for your time. Really appreciate it.
Yes. You've given so much value, and everything from starting your business to running it to scenarios when coming to legal stuff, sustainability, retail, I think was really valuable insight and perspective on D2C and just retail, that it's not only D2C that you have to aim for today. There are other ways, maybe even better.
Yeah. You definitely considering multi-channel strategies is so key. And just knowing that they're there too, I didn't even know about marketplaces until like 2 years ago. I'm like, oh my God, there are people who buy my product and list it from somewhere else, there are so many channels out there now that actually, there's opportunity, I think.
For sure. We want to end with one question. What keeps you motivated? What keeps you, what brings you up out of bed? What's your motivation? What's your drive?
That's a good question. It's funny, like I just looked up and there's a photo of my daughter's just there. And my father died about 18 months ago, and he was a research scientist. So he invented something called a flame ionization detector, which is like a mass spectrometer. If you don't know anything about chemistry, it's where you get a piece of material, you burn it, and you analyze the flame, and that'll tell you what the constituent elements are.
Okay.
And all my life I've been kind of like, I want to do something that like is as groundbreaking as that and as cool as that. Well, I haven't really done a thing like that. I've just managed to make things that hopefully people have fun on, skiing and stuff like that. But I'm kind of like, as I get older, and I said, I just turned 50. As I get older, I kind of realized that we need more of the kind of the Japanese philosophy of thinking in generations rather than thinking, what can I do in this kind of 10 years or 20 years I've got? How big can I get it? How great can it be? Like, I just want to make sure that what I'm doing is slowly changing the world, or just a group of people I know, or whatever, into a direction that would be better for my daughters. And it's something that, I know this is weird, but I live in an environment where there are a lot of athletes, a lot of world-class athletes, a lot of people who risk their lives, a lot of friends who have died from risking their lives. And what a lot of us are kind of thinking about right now, and seeing climate change happen, is the legacy that we're going to be leaving for the next generation and then the next generation. And whatever I can do in a however small a way to try and make sure that something is turning in that direction, I feel is kind of enough actually now. I don't know, maybe I'm just getting old. But
isn't it something
earlier it was just ego. I just want to do cool things.
But it's something that all entrepreneurs have, and it's that thing that you want to build something, and then it goes beyond yourself, which I love. And this is also the reason why we are entrepreneurs and why we love working with other founders and other business people, is because they it's not the ego, it's the building of the thing. It's almost like a sport. It's almost, again, like leaving a legacy, building something that's bigger than themselves. And that's just beautiful. I mean, the world needs more of that.
And creativity. I mean, I'm not an artist. I'm a graphic designer. I'm a product designer. And I know there are some graphic designers who are artists. I'm not. I can't paint. They're not mine. They're my daughters, obviously.
They're beautiful.
They're amazing. But yeah, I'm not an artist, but I cherish artistic expression and those who do it, because I'm not good at it. But without that, I mean, what's the point? Like,
it's just
without
flat.
expression. And exactly. I mean, wasn't that something that Winston Churchill said? If there was something, my wife's English, so we have a lot of English. Anyways, but after the Second World War, there was something where they were like, oh, well, we need to shut down this museum or this art gallery or something like that. And Winston Churchill was like, well, we've won the war. If we've won the war, but we lose that, what's the point? Yeah. And I don't know, that's a bit of a random quote as well. But it's just something that stayed with me. Like if we're not making the world a better place, if we're not doing something that actually is making life more enjoyable and protecting it for the next generation, what they might do and what their kids might achieve, then what's the point,
Yeah.
Well,
what a perfect way to end.
Great ending.
Thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it. It's lovely to talk to you, and I hope to do it again sometime.
Yes,
on a specific topic, maybe a specific topic one time.
Yes, absolutely. Let's do it again. Thank you so much for taking your time today and talking to us, and with our audience as well.
Thank you so much, Tony.
Thank you.
It's been a pleasure having you on.
We thank Tony for sharing so much valuable information in this interview. If you found any value from this conversation, please share it with someone you think could benefit from hearing this as well. Or like and review it so more people like you can find it. Also, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss our upcoming interviews. Speak soon.